and there is my Python being printed here. So we can import the DateTime module that we're going to be learning about. So I'm going to import that. And now one of the coolest things about this library is that it could get you the current time. So if you ever want to know what the current time is, you can use DateTime. And the way we do that is, as always, we create a new variable called time now, and time now will store the current time. So we just say DateTime dot now, and we can print time now. And when I run, here is the current time being printed out. Okay, so let's break this down for a second. I'm going to copy this. I'm going to copy this and bring it down here. So just to highlight one thing, and then we'll get back to the code. What I wanted to point out was this line here. So there's DateTime.now, and there is DateTime, and then there is this period here. So what we're saying with this is we take the library that was imported and we use it. We use it by putting this dot. This dot means that everything after here is going to be something that's part of this library. So what that looks like is DateTime dot and then DateTime dot now. Okay, so this is functionality that is part of the DateTime module that we wouldn't have had without importing it. So that's important to understand. Then we can just print out whatever time now is. So when we say this, we go to Python and we say to the library, hey DateTime, get the current time. Get the current time. And DateTime comes back with us with the current time. So what it does is it's kind of interesting because it gives you this, it returns this. So what is that? This is what it gives you. So this is just the current time. It's written, formatted in a way that computers can understand it. So here we have the year, here is the month, here is the date. So it's no surprise that today is September the now it's interesting, today is actually the 14th, but this is saying the 15th, but that's because wherever this server is, it's apparently the 15th there. So, and this is the time. So it's 00, which means it's 12, 11, which means it's midnight past 11, so 12:11, and this is the seconds. So it is 11:22 or 12:11:22, and then these are the milliseconds. So this is a lot of information that it gives you, but this is because it's so the computer can understand. Okay, so on line 3 here, we're using time now, which is an object of the class DateTime. So that's one other thing that I forgot to tell you, is that this is actually a class, and we talked about classes before. For now, just think of a class as it's like a package that has all of the information to do with the task all encapsulated into one package. So anything to do with dates and time is all part of this class. Everything not to do with it is not here. Okay, so let's look at some other functions that are available to the DateTime package. So the other thing that we can use is another function, another method of the class, which is called, so first what I want to do is just kind of recap what we've got so far. So let's go back here and let's just talk about DateTime. And then we'll get to writing some code, and then we'll eventually work on a little project together that involves DateTime. But so let's go here for a second and let's talk about, we've got DateTime so far. This is the main package, right? So this is the DateTime class, and within the class there are different methods, and as we go along we're going to go ahead and write them down. So the first one that we learned about is DateTime.now, right? So there's DateTime.now. So this returns a string. It gives us, it returns a date time. It gives us the current time pretty much to the millisecond. So that's one of the things that DateTime has. But we can look at another one. Another one that we can do is get the actual date rather than the date and the time. So that's called date.today. So this is another method that you can do. And what does this give back? So let's find that out. So let's go back here and we're going to write DateTime.date.today. And I'm going to print time now. Let's rename this to date now. So we have date now, and I'll print date now. So we're using date.today. So I'm going to run this, and here it prints out the current date according to wherever it is in the world, wherever the server is. Okay, so here it is. So we've got date.today, which gives the current date. So you have options. There's always options available to you. Do you want to get the current date? Do you want to get the current date time down to the exact millisecond? You know, knowing what's important, it's available to you. Now, one final thing I want to talk to you about is I told you this is not giving a string. So this is not a string, even though it looks like a string, it looks like text. It's actually not, because if we were to get the type of this, so there's a special function called type. If we run this function, anything we put in there will give us what the type of this is. So I'm saying it's not a string, and we can see that it's not a string. It's saying that the type of this is a class DateTime.date. So this is a DateTime.date class object. You don't have to worry about what that means, but just know that it's not the same thing as just a very simple piece of text. It's actually an object. And just to prove that this is an object, well, I mean, one of the things we can do is we can look at the internals of this date now. So we can say dir, and most modules come equipped with a dir method. So let's take a look at this one. So this date now has all of these methods that are available to it. We can also take a look at all the methods that are available to the DateTime module itself. So if I were to print out dir DateTime, I'm able to peek inside DateTime and look at some of the things that are available. So we can see our date module is available here, the DateTime. These are both these ones that we've already looked at, DateTime and date. Further on, DateTime can use .now, and date has .today. So there's a lot of methods here that are available to you. So now the first thing everybody says is, well, I want to create new date objects using the date. I have a date. Maybe it's the date that I was born. Maybe it's the date that my pet was born, and I want to represent that date in Python. So I want to use the DateTime objects to create a new date, to spawn a new date. So that's something that we're going to talk about right now, and then we'll take a break. So let's create a new date by importing the DateTime modules. That's the first thing that we're going to do. The next thing we're going to do is create a new date. So we're going to have to create a variable to store that date, right? So the way that it works is every time we create a new thing in Python, we have to have a bucket to store it in. Like we're always saying, think of these variables as buckets. So if we have a variable here called new date on the label, we have a variable label called new date. We're going to put the date time inside here. Okay, so that's sort of what we're doing. This is what it looks like. Okay. So I'm going to create this new date by saying new date equals to datetime.date, and then we can choose any date we want. In the PDF we have this example, 1989 3/30. Okay, so datetime.date 1989 3/30. That's a date. Any date works, so we could say somewhere in the 2000s, maybe 2019 5/17. Okay, any date works. Let's say I want to check. You could put in your own birthday if you want, and then what you could do is print out this date. So let's print new date, and I'm going to run this new date here. And so this is it. It just prints out the date. It's nothing fancy, but it is fancier than just a string. So this is the date. I can also print the type. So if I put type before that and put an opening bracket, so put the print, and then inside the print put a type and put a bracket there, I can get the type of this, which is we're going to get a datetime.date. Okay, so that's how we create a new date. Okay, so pretty simple stuff. So actually try it. So what I would do after this lesson, just go ahead and create like 100 dates, and that way you'll really get it. We're going to learn about comparing dates, but we'll learn that in the future. For now, let's continue on. We are going to talk about how do you what date, if one date is later than another date, how many days difference. There's a wonderful method that's available to you called the time delta, and there's lots of methods in Python that are available to you that you can compare dates. So you can compare how many days until your favorite team starts their new baseball season, or how many days until your vacation, how many days until school ends, how much time is left in this report, how long a movie is or a song is. All of these things are used. We're using the DateTime methods for that. So yeah, so we'll talk about that later, but we're not really done here. There's another way to more easily create a date, and that is the concept of a timestamp. So a timestamp is just a number of seconds from the date that's set in the past. So they chose a date called January 1st, 1970. So it's kind of random, but let's talk about this. So we have a timer running from the beginning here, from January 1st, 1970. So there is a reason for this date, but let's not get into that right now. Let's just say from then on a timer began, and they started counting. Seconds. So we use the timestamp to represent the number. So we can have a timestamp. So let's say we have code that looks like this. From DateTime, import date, and we're going to say timestamp equals to date.from timestamp, and then we'll use 500000000. We're using the from timestamp method to convert 5 million seconds from 1/1/1970 to a date. So let's print the timestamp. So what I'm doing here, I'm going to break this down like usual. Let's bring it down over here. So we created a bucket called timestamp. Would put date.from timestamp. So we're saying from January 1st, 1970, count 1 million or count 5 million seconds. Count 5 million seconds. Whatever that date comes to, give me that date and print it. Okay, so that's all this function is saying. Just count the seconds and give me that date. And hey, that date turns out to be 1985, November the 5th. Okay, years, months, and days. So that's how we've measured time since the beginning of time measurement. We've always, well, actually started with measuring the cycles of the moon, but we've kind of all landed on this years, month, date kind of situation. So Python obviously would let us have support for all of that, because date is an object, you see. You can print out specific properties such as the year, the month, or the day isolated. Let's draw this out in the sketchpad, but first let's code it up and then we'll draw it out. So just like before, we're going to import DateTime, and then I'm going to create a variable bucket called DateTime, called newDate, and inside newDate it's going to live DateTime.date, and I'm going to use 2001 1 and 25. So the first January, the 25th of January in the year 2001. I just put that date out as random. And then we can print new date. Before I run, I'm going to create another variable called date now, and that is going to equal to datetime.date.today. Okay, so we looked at this before, right? This gives us today's date. And now I'm going to print three things. Okay. So I'm going to print date now.year. I'm going to print new date.month, and I'll print new date.weekday. Okay, so three things are being printed. The first one, and maybe I can write what's being printed right in the print statement here. So date now.year, comma. That's the first. The second one is new date.month. So go ahead and copy this down if you're following along at home. And this last one, new date.weekday. So three things being printed. Yeah? Okay. So the first was the new date. So this was 2001-01-25. So, and the second thing was date now. So let's change new date to, let's change it to, so I'm going to go ahead and rename all occurrences of new date to past date. If you're wondering how I did that, I just right click and I click rename all occurrences. So just to be a little bit more clear. So we have the past date, which is 2001. So date now.year, it's the 2023. That's right. New date dot month. Sorry, this should be past date. And this should be past date here. So the past date dot month is 1, and past date dot weekday, which day of the week it was 3. Okay, so the way that we can think about this is I'm going to imagine that your DateTime object, some date like, I don't know, January 1st, 2001, the first day of the new millennium. Well, January 1st, 2001, remember, it's not a string. So it's not a string, but rather it's a DateTime object. And I'll make it a different color so it's easier to see. It's actually a DateTime object. And what that means is it has things inside of it. For example, the weekday method that we looked at, it gives you the day of the week. If you were to use other methods like we just used, for example, year, we have this method called year. Okay, and we use that here, remember, dot year. Well, this is not a method, it's a property. But the point is, we have different ways to get at different properties, different ways to format this date. If we just want the year, we can say it's 2001. If we just want the month, so that might give us the month, which is 1. We can also format it different ways. Even a month can be represented in different ways. So I think we all know what I mean, but let me just make it super clear. We have a month here of January. But January can be represented in different ways. It's the first month, so it can be represented by 1. Some people just have the short name Jan, and that's also used a lot. The 1 can be 01, just to be very specific. So you can put a 0 in front of it. And yeah, there's other ways. Some people might write just J, although June and July is also there, so maybe J. You can't even use Jan. But there's definitely different, at least these 3 ways to represent January. You can say 1, you can say Jan, you can say 01, and I'm probably forgetting a few more. But so the DateTime method is able to represent different aspects of your date, just like January 1st, let's say January 1st, 97. You can write it like that. You can write it like January 01, 1997. You can write it like 1997, 101. So, lots of different ways to write the same date, and that's why we have methods. That's why we have DateTime, so we can access all of those methods that we need. So we always like to do a little project at the end of the session. So we have 10 more minutes, so let's go ahead and create a little project using DateTime. So the objective of this project is to create a Python script that's going to allow the user to input significant dates and events in their life, and then calculate various statistics and information based on those dates. Okay, so I've created this before, so you can follow along. We're going to start by importing DateTime. So what we're going to import is this DateTime from this DateTime. okay? Because we don't need this. We just need this. So we're going to import DateTime from DateTime. And then I'm going to create a function to get the user's birth date, and we're going to validate that birth date. Okay, so this function we're going to create import DateTime, and also from DateTime import DateTime. Made a little mistake there. From DateTime import DateTime, and we're going to create a function that gets the user's birth date and validates it. Okay, so def get birth date while true. Let's get the user's birth date by using the input function. Birth date string is going to be input. Enter your birth date in this format: YYYY MMDD. So that's the format we want from them. So every time we get something back from the users, we want to use the try, because we want to validate whether what they've said is, what they've given us is correctly formatted. So we're going to use try. So I'll give you the link to this project. If some of these things you're not familiar with, that's okay. Just want to do a quick project that maybe is a little bit more advanced than what you're used to, but is going to be hopefully a little bit of a challenge. So let's try, and we're going to try to format. The thing that we're trying to do now is format what they've given us into a different variable called birth date. So birth date equals to datetime dot strptime. Okay, this it gives you a new datetime taken from the string that they've given us. So it takes a string and it turns it into a datetime object. The string that it takes is this string that we've just created, birth date string, and we are going to give it some formatting. So we haven't looked at formatting yet, but it's a way to write down the date that's given in different formats. We did talk about this when we were mentioning here. These are different formats. So you can look at the same word January and look at a date January 1st and format it in different ways. So the way we do that, the way we handle all these formatting is done here. So in this case, and we'll talk about this in greater detail in future videos, but for now, just YMD. This is what we are going to format it as. You could think of it as year, month, and date, right? It kind of makes sense. And then if that's good, we'll return it. We have an else, we have an except, because sometimes there might be a value error. If there is, we'll say, hey, this was an invalid format. Please try again. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is create a function to allow the user to input significant dates and associated events, storing them in a dictionary. So this could be something like a birthday, or the first time that you passed a class, or your first recital, anything like that. Okay, so we're going to call this one. So what does this function do? It just gets the user's birth date and validate it. Okay, get the user's birthday. This one, what we're going to do is input significant dates and events. Okay, and we're going to just store them in a dictionary. So we're going to say def get significant dates. Okay, and here is the dictionary that we're going to use to store it. Dates dictionary. So while true, let's get the date string directly from the user. So we're going to say enter a significant date in this format, MMDD. Okay, or stop, because we're saying while true, so we have to have a way to stop. So if they just give us the word stop, then we'll stop asking them. That's how we'll know that they've finished. So now we can go ahead and break out of this loop if the date string to lower case is the word stop. So if they tell us to stop, we'll stop. But if not, let's keep going. We're going to assume that they've given us a nice date, and we're going to format it in this formatting order, Y, M, D, like that. Okay, and then we're going to say, what is the name of that event? Enter the event on this date. And we'll finally say that store whatever they give us. So for on this date, we have this event. And if there is some sort of an error, like a value error, then I'm going to print invalid format. Please try again, just like we did before on line 12. Okay, let's return the dates dict at the end. So we're almost done. We have a few more minutes to go, and the next one is we're going to calculate and display some statistics based on the input dates, such as the number of days between two dates, the user's age at the time of each event, so on and so forth. So let's create that function. So it'll just display some various statistics. Display various stats about significant dates. Okay, so given your birth date, it's going to take a birth date, and remember, it's going to take the dates dictionary. I know it's almost time to go, but let's just finish this because we're so close to being done, and it's a very cool project. So date event in dates dict.items. So we're going to create a loop. We're going to loop through every single item in the significant dates dictionary, and we're going to say that the item has a date and the event. So first of all, we're going to get the difference between the days, difference between the date and the birth date in days. So we want how many, what is the difference between the date of an event, of a significant event, from the birth date in days. And what about the years difference? So maybe we can divide the days difference by 365. Okay, and then print the following string. On the date of the event, you were years difference, right? You were years difference years old. Okay, so I'm going to try this out with my own birth date, and then you guys can do this on your own. So it's time for the main part of our script. So this is the main game loop. Just hang on for just 1 second. Name equals to main. So birth date equals to get birth date. Dates dict equals to get significant dates, and display statistics from your birth date and dates dict. And I know I spelled something wrong here. Okay, if I've done everything right, which I'm not sure if I have, but let's try it. Let's run the game. Okay, so enter your birth date. So I'm going to give my birthday here. I'm going to make one up. So let's just say my birthday was 1995. It wants it in this format. So 1995, March 21st. Enter a significant date. So I'm going to enter maybe my, let's see, maybe my first day of school. So I'm going to make it up. I'm going to say if I was born in 1995, maybe my first day of school was 1998. Somewhere, I don't know, I'll just say 0920 or 03. 0903. First day of school. Maybe I moved to a different country in 2001. So I'll say 2001, 03, I don't know, 21, moved to a new country. Okay, so that's it. I'm going to stop. And here it says on the first day of school you were 3 years old. On the date of when you moved to the new country you were 6 years old. So that's cool, right? It can, just using 3 function, we created a little memory trapper thing. So that's it. Thank you for coming.